We're back
with more reviews
of heavy metal albums.
So it's Mike and Steve here from the McCarthy Boys Super Fun Metal Hour. That's what we're going to decide to call this show, and it will be actually 3 hours in length instead of 1 hour as the title implies. Every episode, 3 hours of us talking about metal back and forth, and it will be
no
fun.
intermissions.
No intermissions, and actually, if you try to pause the video, it shuts your entire computer down with a virus. So yeah, that's the name of our show.
Yep.
And today, as promised, we're going to be doing 2 album reviews. We're going to be doing Gatecreeper, Deserted, their new album, and we're going to be doing Spirit Adrift, Divided by Darkness, their new album. And the reason we kind of grouped these together is because members from each of the bands, Gatecreeper is a side project of some of the guys from Spirit Adrift, so we felt that there were definitely some things that connected the two.
Yes, and we were going to start off with the Gatecreeper album, but I say we do the Spirit Adrift album because that's, if we didn't see them at the Philly Metal and Beer Festival, we wouldn't have known about them. So
all right.
Let's start off with Spirit Adrift. This is their second full-length album?
Third, I think. Curse of Conception, I think, was their second.
Okay. I thought they had just an EP. Regardless, this was an album that is probably going to be on my top 5 albums for the year. It's so good. Their Curse of Conception, we first saw these guys when we were, was it 2017?
2018?
2017. At the Philadelphia Beer and Metal Festival.
It was 2018 because it was right before To Drink for the Night Itself came out.
You're right. It was, like I said, 2018. So we saw them. They were the first band playing the first day. So, I mean, they had a tough slot.
Yeah, that's a tough slot, especially at a beer tasting festival.
Yeah. Everybody, there was, I don't know, a few dozen people watching them. Everybody else was getting their beers. And I never heard of them before that. And they had a really cool logo, and that's really all I knew about them. And they started playing and just got into them instantly. I remember thinking as they were playing, the one thing that popped in my head after listening to Curse of Conception is it reminded me of if like Typo Negative were around in the 70s almost. It just kind of a doomy, just that was one of my thoughts when I listened to the whole album in full.
Right. Yeah, when we saw them live, my first thoughts was it sounded like a cross between In Flames and Pallbearer is kind of what I thought. I loved the hookiness of the twin guitars that they had, the little bit of Iron Maiden and the Pallbearer. And actually, my first thought when I listened to this album was that it reminded me a lot of Ride the Lightning.
Okay.
In fact, and it's not only in its consistency, but in the riffs and in the structures of some of the songs, especially the top. I think I got 3 tracks here that stand out the most, and one you cited to me first when you heard the album was Angel in Abyss, which reminded me of Fade to Black. And it's just such a well-written song. You have riffs that sound like they're from Fade to Black. Riffs that song, the ending riff sounds like Bark at the Moon. And it reminded me of Bark at the Moon. But it's just, throughout the album, they're all strong. Hear Her is the single, and that one's probably the catchiest.
Hear Her is like just, when I think I heard that one before Angel in Abyss, and that riff is just so chunky and heavy and just so good though. It's you can't not bob your head to it, and that's definitely one of mine. And going back to Angel in Abyss, I mean, that was just, when I heard that, and it's just the guitar and his voice, and his voice is just, it creates such a good atmosphere, like such a huge depth.
He sounds like Ozzy. He sounds a lot like Ozzy, actually. Ozzy's not my favorite metal singer, not even close.
I don't think he sounds like Ozzy.
I'm not a big fan of Ozzy.
Nathan Garrett, is that right?
But Nathan Garrett's voice is I think close to it, but I like it, so it's not a knock on it.
And he's got like this.
It's got a wail.
It's like a scream, but not a scream, and it's just it's such a big voice, and I just absolutely love it, especially in the beginning when he first starts off in Angel in Abyss.
I think what really stuck out to me too about this album was the riffage. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of good riffs on this album. I was kind of going back through this year listening to new albums, and I was thinking about bands that aren't known for riff oriented music, and one of those, I was listening to the new Lacuna Coil album, and it just feels like it's like open E, open E, open E, open E, and there's no riffs. This album feels like chock full of riffs. Like there's like James Hetfield can just create a riff out of nothing. Like there's so many good riffs in this album. Born Into Fire, I believe the third track.
Born Into Fire, that was one of my top tracks.
Yeah,
It reminded me of Dio era Sabbath almost, like it just, except maybe heavier, and it just like that was the first thing that popped in my head.
And that really is what it sounds like. It sounds like Sabbath mixed with Metallica with maybe like a little bit of Paul Bearer. Like that's really and the album's so consistent. I highly recommend it. For me, with everything taken into consideration, I give it 8 out of 10 James Hetfields.
Yeah, I would go 9 horns up. I really loved it. I've been listening to it since it came out in March, I think, and it was it was just it's
May maybe one of the two.
Yeah, but it stuck with me this whole year and definitely be up there for one of my top albums this year.
Right. Okay, cool. I mean, strong album, highly recommended by us. Next, we're going to move on to Gatecreeper, Deserted. And again, this is the death metal project of Nate Garrett and a few of the others from Spirit Adrift. And
Chase, I believe, is on vocals.
Yes, yeah, the dude with the mustache.
Yep.
And I thought this album was a little less consistent for me. I did like it. There are some like old school, like definitely like Florida 1980s, early 90s death metal vibes. I'm not too into that scene. My wheelhouse is really what I love is black metal, Scandinavian, just doesn't have to be Norwegian, and melodic death metal. Those are my 2 favorite genres, and thrash. So the stuff like Morbid Angel and Obituary and all that stuff, I'm really not. There's nothing that I've heard by either of those bands that have caught my ear and really planted me into their music. But I mean, I've heard things here and there that I like, but nothing that really gripped me. But Gatecreeper, because they put in that doomy. They definitely have a doom element to them, and because you got the riffage there that Spirit Adrift is known for, Gatecreeper was accessible to me, and I really liked a few of the tracks. Some of the tracks I thought were,
After a while, just listen to the whole CD. Like a lot of it did blend together. There was a lot of really good, like it
together.
Just I really love like the riffage over the double bass drums, and just I mean his voice is consistent throughout. It doesn't vary much. Like, but if you're whenever you're in a certain mood, like just this death metal, it's a good album to listen to. I enjoyed listening to it. It's not something that I would throw on my everyday rotation, but if I just want something heavy and loud and good, and I'll definitely throw this on.
I mean, there are definitely some standout tracks, especially
Boiled Over. I really liked. That was one of my favorites.
See, Boiled Over, I felt like that was for me. Boiled Over was filler. Puncture Wounds I thought was really good. That was like that old school fast thrashy sound. The wailing guitar at the top of it, with the wailing
Puncture Wound. Yep.
From the Ashes, I thought had a really good riff to it. I thought it was again, it's that accessibility of that riff that catches your ear. Ruthless, I thought, was probably that and the final track, Absence of Light, were the 2 standout tracks for me. And Ruthless, when the lead singer is screaming the chorus, that's where they just really kind of hit their stride for me. Same thing with Absence of Light, and the little bit of slowdown that it had at the end, I kind of like that.
I liked Everlasting and Barbaric Pleasures. I think there were definitely some thrashier parts, some doomier parts, and overall each track kind of had their own consistent vibe, and it's good. I mean, it was good. Yeah, I would give it. I would say 6.5 horns up.
I'm gonna give it 5 James Hetfields. 5 James Hetfields.
That's failing.
Oh, I mean, I liked half of the album, and I didn't not like the other half of the album. I just like you said, it just when I put it on, there was nothing that kind of grabbed me on some of the tracks, and then when I put on some of the tracks, it grabbed me. So
like with Spirit Adrift, like his vocal range is you can feel it on every track. Where I mean, Chase's vocals on this, I mean they're good, but it doesn't vary much between.
He's got
tracks.
A good scream. I mean,
yeah, it's not. I'm not saying it's bad at all.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think his scream is good, but yeah, I agree with you. In the Spirit Adrift is definitely more accessible to the casual listener, and then to us that. I've never seen Gatecreeper. I would like to see them live.
They're playing Philly Metal Fest with Mayhem in a Bath.
And I'd like to see them live. And Spirit Adrift, like I said, when they were live, they knocked it out of the ballpark for us.
They did. Yeah, I would love to see them again.
So 5 James Hetfields for me on that one.
Okay.
All right. Time to do our Victorville Film Archive album picks of the week here. And I wanted to talk about a classic that some of you youngins might not be familiar with, and we're going to put that right up there. This is Samael, Passage. It's their 1996 album, and it really is a genre. There's nothing that really sounds like it that's come out since, and nothing that sounds like it that came out before it. It really is in its own unique category. Samael does their own thing. Lately, it's not as technical or complex as Passage was, or as melodic, but that album, Passage, is just the only way to describe it is if Trent Reznor produced, I don't even know, a death metal or a black metal album, because they're second generation black metal, so something slower and doomier, but just as aggressive. The Ceremony of Opposites really was kind of when they found their stride. And then Passage is when they took it and they blew it out to a whole new level. A lot of people get turned off by the drum machines on this album, and actually I think the drum machines are some of the best parts, especially the intro of Angels Decay. Love Angels Decay. The lyrics to Angels Decay and the lyrics to this whole entire album are some of Vorf's best. They really are, because when you move into Vorfalak writing lyrics in the mid-2000s to kind of now, even if you read some of his lyrics, it sounds like he is a hippie.
Yeah.
And I don't care if he's a hippie. I don't listen to music with those types of lyrics. It's not my preference. So Passage, I think, though, Passage, really, the lyrics tell a great story. The production sounds great. It's Waldemar Sorosha, Century Media's kind of resident producer in the mid-90s that produced a ton of albums like Tiamat's Wild Honey and albums like that. Groundbreaking metal albums from the 90s. And I think Samael gets often overlooked. I went to a show where Amorphous and Samael co-headlined, and that was in about 2011, and there was it was in Toronto. We live in Buffalo, so it was about an hour and a half away. Toronto's a huge city, and there was 150 people to see Samael, and I felt that they weren't getting their due, and they're not getting their due in metal right now, I don't think, and they've produced some great albums. I think right around the time of Passage, I think people were expecting big things of them, and I think they moved in the electronic direction, and I think people just weren't on board with it, but it really does work on Passage, and Passage, Moonskin is such a great song, My Savior, Rain, Jupiterian Vibe, Born Under Saturn, just some great grooves, great keyboard work, and the album highly recommended, genre defining, sets its own genre, and there's been none like it since.
I am going with the band. It's not a classic album, but it is one. It came out last year, and I haven't stopped listening to yet, by the band Zeal and Ardor. I kind of played you some of them. They have an album called Stranger Fruit, and and it's a mix of black metal and blues, and they have a lot of slave chants in their songs, and it's nothing I've heard before. And
Dronier?
No, not even Dronier. It's I'll play you some of them some other time, but it's when I never heard of them, and then at the end of 2018 I was reading some best of lists, just good albums from last year, and this one topped a bunch of them, and I never heard of them, so I went and listened to it, and it hasn't gotten off my rotation, and I think it's accessible, it's heavy, it's melodic, it's really good. The songs like Row Row and Gravedigger's Chant, they're just, to me, they just stand out from, there's so many musicians and bands out there, and there's so many good ones, and for somebody to stand out and for you to be able to say, oh, I haven't heard something like that before, it really just caught my ear like nothing I ever heard before.
I'll have to give it another listen. What was their name again?
Zeal and Ardor. Saw them earlier this spring at the Rec Room here in Buffalo to maybe 100 people on a Wednesday night or something, and Erica loved them. They played a great set. They only have the one album out. They have I think an EP and a live album, but no, they're really good. So Zeal and Ardor, check them out.
And that's when it comes to metal, especially in our city, and I don't know how it is for everybody's cities out there. Our Buffalo, the metal does not get its due here. Very rarely do we see a band stopping by our city. We usually have to go to Toronto for shows or Rochester for shows, and it's sad because you know, they book alternative music festivals here, and you hear the lineup, and you're like, this is the worst. These are the worst sets of bands that I've ever heard.
Meanwhile, we drove to Rochester to see At the Gates last year in a club with 100 other people, a band at the Gates, and it was just, it's crazy to think like you're that close, and they loved it. It was an off day from when they were opening for Behemoth, and they were just loving it. It was a filler day for them. And
there was a black metal band there called Angelicon. Angelicon, I guess it's the name of the first great dragon of Middle Earth, so I apologize if I didn't get the name right. I bought their album. They're from Rochester. They are great American.
About the lights, I'll fix that for next time.
They are great American black metal, and the reason I say that is because there's a lot of American black metal that I cannot get into when it mixes with the drone stuff. Mike's not too biased against these guys, but there's one band that I cannot listen to, and, you know, respect to them as musicians, but your music doesn't click with me, is Death Heaven. And the mixing of drone music with black metal to this shoegaze black metal thing, I can't get into it. And that's my problem with most American metal bands. But these guys in Gallicon, they sounded like Dissection meets Dark Funeral meets everything that's great Gorgoroth, from the Swedish and the Norwegian black scenes. All those bands are obviously all those bands are Swedish, and that's what they sounded like. They great riffage. And At the Gates came on and they played, and it was November of last year, and Mike points to the guy in front of us and recognizes the drummer from Mastodon checking out the show. So that was pretty cool. Mike always has those eyes. He always catches people. It's like,
yeah, it's funny because
I'll see Schoolcraft in the balcony.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, it's funny, and there are metal shows that come through here. Like I think later this week, like it depends on the genre. As I Lay Dying sold out the Town Ballroom like a couple last month, which I mean it's a metal band and it's a tour coming through, but it's you know, a certain kind, and you know that metalcore scene is bigger now as one of the subgenres. But
yeah, it's definitely like making a comeback, I would say. The whole genre as a whole, the whole metalcore thing. And there were some moments I got into it and like some of the stuff, and then overall as a whole I was kind of impartial to it. I don't think it did any damage, because I think it made people more technically proficient players. It was better than new metal in my opinion. You know, people were looking at In Flames and they were like, hey, I should take a page from these guys, and they were infusing it with hardcore things, and I didn't mind that, you know, so I liked it better than you know, like I'm trying to think of like Crazy Town or like that.
I was big into new metal. I was in high school when it was big, so you know that's when you develop a lot of your musical tastes, and it just honestly it was kind of a gateway for me into stuff like At the Gates. Like I'm wearing a Limp Bizkit t-shirt and a Korn t-shirt, and eventually that kind of leads me into, I mean, somebody bigger like Slipknot, but then also it got me listening to like borrowing more of your CDs, and you know you were well ahead of me in terms of listening to bands like Amorphous or At the Gates or In Flames. So I mean, I was late to that party, but new metal turned me onto that stuff. So
that was our episode for today. So you heard it here first. Spirit Abyss, 8 out of 10 James Hetfields. Gatecreeper, 5 out of 10 James Hetfields. And then Spirit Abyss.
Spirit Adrift.
9? Did I give it 9?
Yeah, you gave
9 horns up.
And Gatecreeper.
6.5 horns up.
6.5 horns up.
Jesus.
So join us next time, guys, on the McCarthy Brothers Super Fun Metal Hour.
We'll fix the light, get a better setup.
Give us some comments on some bands maybe you would like us to review or check out their albums, and we will give them a listen and tell you what we think.
Yep.
All right, thanks.